Hi everyone, so we're going to render out some tallow today for skincare use, and all it takes is 3 ingredients: water, sea salt, and some beef fat trimmings. Now this beef fat came from a brisket from one of our cows that we had for dinner last night. I trimmed it before seasoning and cooking it, and then stored it in the fridge overnight. I then cut it into 1 to 2 inch pieces. I do recommend doing that cold. It's just a bit easier to cut, or you can use a meat grinder if you have access to one of those. I just prefer doing it this way. We also need to make sure that we are using grass-fed beef because we do not want to be exposing our skin to any type of hormones or gross stuff like that. And we also need to make sure that we are using non-iodized salt. I prefer sea salt. If it is iodized salt, it can discolor the fat and give it a weird taste if we are using it to consume again, but in this case we are not. Here I have just a regular pot. I'm going to turn it on to low heat, and then I will add the beef fat trimmings into the pot. We then want to add our water to the pot and just cover the fat. We'll then take our salt, and we want to stay about a 1-to-1 ratio with the salt. So I have just under a pound of beef fat. It came out to about 14 ounces. So I'm going to add a little less than 1 tablespoon of salt. Now if we had 2 pounds of beef fat, we'd add 2 tablespoons of salt. So just 1-to-1 ratio. We'll give that a stir. I'm going to now turn the stove onto low. We want to bring this mixture to a simmer. We don't want it to boil. We want to keep it at a very low temp. It's a very low and slow process. It's been about 30 minutes and we just reached the point of simmering. We want it to take a little bit of time to heat up so that we're not scorching the beef trimmings. And as it's been heating up, I've been occasionally stirring it as well so it doesn't get scorched. What we're going to do now is let it cook for another 2 to 3 hours, or until we just have a pot of tallow, beef gristle, and water. As we continue to cook the beef trimmings, we'll start to notice some oil rising to the top of the pot. That's because the salt is going to separate the tallow from the gristle, meat, and water. And if our water level starts to drop below the top of the meat, it's important that we add some more water to the pot. Okay, so it's been about an hour and a half, and I've noticed the water level is getting a little bit low, so I'm going to add a little bit of water. The trimmings have been cooking for about 3 to 3.5 hours, and I've turned the stove off, and they've been sitting cooling for about 5 minutes. And now we're going to strain them. You need to be careful not to get any of this on those, because it's no longer just meat and water. It's essentially a pot of oil. I'm using this bowl lined with cheesecloth to strain the mixture, but if you have a mesh strainer, that works too. Here we have our bowl of tallow. And now we're just going to cover it and store it in the fridge to let it harden. Now what we want to do is remove this top disc of tallow from the gelatin. I'm going to use a normal butter knife to go around the edge of the bowl and then to cut it into 4s to pop out the tallow. This is our tallow, and we can see that that beef gelatin is still on there. So we're just going to use the knife, and we are going to just remove it and discard it into a bowl. Here's the beef gelatin that we harvested from the tallow. It isn't used or incorporated into the tallow we've rendered, So you can discard of it, but it is great for dehydrating and adding into soups as thickeners. So here we have our tallow, and we're just going to add that back to a clean pot. What we're going to do now is purify it. You can go through this process as many times as you want until you feel that your tallow is as pure as you like. I've added my tallow to the pot, and we're just going to cover it with some water. And I'm going to add about a tablespoon of salt. We're going to turn that on to low heat and then give it a stir. We're going to heat this mixture in the pot until it's all liquefied. As we're liquefying this mixture, we need to be frequently stirring it. We can see that the tallow is becoming very soft and starting to melt. Here we have our melted mixture. You can see that there's no solid chunks left. It's also important that you do not bring this mixture to a simmer or a boil. It needs to slowly heat. So now we need to strain it again. So here I have a bowl lined with cheesecloth. If you have a mesh strainer, that works too. We're just going to carefully pour the mixture into this bowl. Like I said, you can go through this purification process as many times as you like. I usually find that after one purification process that my tallow is pretty pure and neutral smelling. But if you do have that beefy smell still, a few more purification processes can get rid of it. Also, if you happen to scorch any of your beef trimmings during the rendering process and have some burnt pieces in your tallow, if you keep going through the purification process, it can save the tallow. We're now going to cover the tallow again and put it in the fridge to cool. Here's our pretty white tallow. We can see the discoloration in the water to where it filtered out some more stuff that's not supposed to be in the tallow. And then the white solid is the tallow itself. This is technically a finished product, so you could stop here and break it into chunks and store it in a jar or a sealed container. But what I'm going to do now is pry this out with just a butter knife and put it back into the pot to melt. We don't need this water for any reason, so we can just discard of it. Now, melting this down, you could once again either have just broke it into chunks and stored it, or melted it down and then poured it in a container to store it. But let's add some oils. Now, this is my favorite way to make tallow. You can choose other oils. There are a bunch of oils who have different properties and benefits, and they're also great to use. We're going to turn the stove on to low heat and get the tallow nice and melted to make sure there's no solid pieces, and keep stirring it every once in a while. Like I said, you could have stopped with the hard tallow and just broken it up into pieces and stored it, or you can melt it down and then pour it into a container to store. But we're going to add some oils to it. We're going to make it my favorite way. There's a bunch of different oils that have different benefits, and you can make your own. This is just how I like to make it. We're going to add some frankincense and some lavender. Now, we don't want the concentration of these oils to be super high because it can harm our skin, causing burning or irritation. And so I'm only going to add about 2 to 3 drops of each because this batch did not make a lot of tallow. I only had about 14 ounces of beef trimmings, so less than a pound. And so this is really about one small jar size amount. So this combination is really good for acne fighting, anti-aging, helping with dark spots, soothing irritation. I just really enjoy it. So we're gonna start with the frankincense. Get about 2 to 3, we did 3 drops of that one. And then we'll add some lavender. That bottle was empty, so I had to get another. Let's add the lavender. Now we are going to add some olive oil because whenever the tallow hardens, it is a very dense, firm solid, so this will soften it just a little bit. That was about a tablespoon, and we're going to give it a stir. Now I have this glass jar to store the tallow in, and we're going to gently pour this melted mixture into the pot. So a little less than a pound of beef trimmings gave me between a half a cup and a cup of tallow. And now we're going to set this in the fridge and let it harden, and we'll see what it looks like when it's done. Here we have our final product. We can see that it's completely hardened and solid now. I'll show you what it looks like. So this can be stored at room temperature. It can also be stored in the fridge, but it does have a longer shelf life at room temperature. So to apply it, you just use your fingers and apply it directly to your skin. This is a really great moisturizer, day to day, morning, night, throughout the day. It will not clog your pores. It actually helps with collagen production, has loads of vitamins and minerals, and it's actually great for soothing injuries. Now, some people have concern with the use of salt while rendering the tallow and through the purification process, but salt is actually water soluble. So whenever we strain it and we allow the tallow to harden, the salt leaves with the water. Thank you guys for watching. If you happen to find this video interesting or helpful, give it a like and subscribe below so you don't miss any future content. If you guys have any questions, or you happen to make this tallow, let me know in the comments. And if you have any future video suggestions, drop those in the comments as well. I'm also going to link my Instagram in the description below if you guys want to go check that out and give it a follow. Cheerio, Andrasta.